Our next speaker will show us steps that she took to move her community to Slack and how they saw a 500% increase in active users. She is a business and marketing nerd focusing on growth, community building, product, and partnerships. She obsesses over metrics and connects people to resources they need to do their best work. On a given day, she pets anywhere from 2 to 6 dogs. That's a lot of dogs. I have 3 and they're driving me crazy. So if you need 2 more, okay. Everybody, please welcome Margot Mazur.
How's it going? You can hear me? Okay, cool. Hi, my name is Margot. I am the partnership coordinator at Wistia. So we do video hosting and analytics for business, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how we moved our community over to Slack from Ruby on Rails and how we saw some pretty incredible growth coming from that. So our old community was, and just like our new community, is full of really, really passionate, dedicated folks who have an interest in creating video. So, old or new, that's still the same type of folks who really contribute to our community, contribute to our product, and we want to give them that awesome experience. And I'm going to show you a little video that they made to introduce new Wistia community members to the platform, and it kind of shows you a little bit of our quirky community personality and who these folks actually are.
Hello. Hey, welcome.
Welcome. Hello.
Hey, welcome.
Bonjour. Hi.
Hi. Welcome. Welcome to the Wistia community.
Welcome from RJ Metrics.
Hi from Sales Cycle.
Lots of love from Ticket Lead.
Welcome.
All right, I think that's perfect.
Yeah. I love these people. So this is kind of our style. Our community is very collaborative. They kind of just came up with this on their own and created this video. We had a ton more submissions for this project that I wasn't able to fit into this video, but we used this video in onboarding, in all sorts of different projects throughout the company, throughout our content, and this is just kind of like a little note of how our community puts into the product. I'm going to talk a little bit about our old community. This is kind of what it looked like. It had some really awesome qualities. So it was public facing, so anyone could look at it, anyone could Google it, which means it was great for SEO. Whenever you typed in like Wistia, DSLR, or Wistia editing, all these awesome forums came up, which was really great for us. It was super easy to get content ideas, so we could essentially just go to the community and pull out ideas to create some blog posts that did really well on our site. Super easy to search, great search, helped onboard new customers, so we used a lot of these answers in our onboarding emails for folks. And so our support team actually would link prospects or customers to these posts so they can get an idea of how to answer their questions. So a lot of really great things about this community. Some not so great things. Built on Rails, and the only person who knew how to even play around with the code was this guy. Thankfully, still at Wistia, also one of our top developers, so you can imagine how difficult it was to actually get a hold of his time when something went wrong or we needed some sort of updates. The barrier for engagement, really high. So if you're thinking about forums, you're thinking like, okay, here's someone's question, I'm gonna write an answer, it's gotta be good. Because everyone can search and they see my name attached to it, so they'll think through these long answers and they'll really type them up, and then it's there forever, and it's like, oh my God. So a lot of people were really nervous and didn't really engage as much as they could have because that barrier was super high. Very difficult to get folks to take an action, so a CTA was like, oh, well, it's there, it's like not very urgent because I can come back to it at any point, so a lot of those CTAs had a low rate. Analytics were hard to come by as well. Like I said, only this guy could really build that functionality. So we only had like an active user or a passive user number, a daily user number, and that was really it. So not a lot going on there. And folks weren't able to share their personality. Like folks could put in a GIF or an image or something like that, but mostly it was kind of serious Q&A sort of thing because folks knew that you could just look up their name and then see their answers, right? So they weren't about to get like silly or like show their personality as much, which made it kind of serious and didn't really fit with the Wistia vibe. Engagement was low, like I said. Not a lot of folks really engaged as much as they could have because it was easy to find their answers, so they didn't want to be too silly. I will say Slack sucks. We all probably use Slack, or like a lot of us use Slack. And for our teams, our individual company teams, Slack is great, super fun. But when it comes to community, it's kind of the worst. It's not a community platform. And they've been very vocal about that. So if you go onto their site, you'll see that they actually say, hey, Slack is for teams, like company teams. They use the word office here, right? Review a sales contract, finalize next year's budget. It's like really company sort of speak. They want to make sure you know this is not for community purposes. And if you have a Slack, does anyone here have a Slack community? Holy shit, okay. If you have a Slack community and you've tweeted or emailed them with anything, you've probably gotten the answer that like, hey, this actually isn't a priority. Or like, this actually isn't meant for communities, so like, sorry. That's very common for folks who have Slack communities and need help. You're not gonna get a lot of help from Slack. However, a lot of companies are now starting to use Slack for community purposes, even though it's not meant for that, which I think is really inspiring because as community builders, we're kind of just figuring out what to do. And so we're starting to figure out that, hey, like, we can use Slack for this completely other thing, right, that it's not meant for. We're essentially inventing the space. If I were David Spinks, I would say that. So I will say that it's an inspiring platform. It's an inspiring opportunity for us to kind of create with this platform. And I'm not going to rile you up too much. First, I'm going to talk about why it sucks. So where Slack falls short, there's a lot of places. I'm going to start by talking about search. Search is super hard on Slack. I think for teams, for company teams, it might seem like kind of simple, but when you're actually going back to look for information that your community members might need over and over, it's very difficult to get. So one of the community issues that I think a lot of us see is, I'm like, what did I even put on this screenshot? That a lot of folks see is people asking the same questions again and again. Right? You see that all the time on your forums, and you also see that a lot on Slack. And it's not as easy for folks to actually search through and find the answers that they want. It's also expensive as shit, right? So if you've ever seen that red bar, you're seeing your team has more than 10,000 messages, so guess what? Like, you can't see any of them unless you pay us more money. And that's not ideal for a community which really focuses on information, right? For the Wistia community, we're a community of video creators, video marketers, sales folks who use video. That information on how to do their jobs well with video is really critical to their success, right? And if you can't use the search to find old messages, that is incredibly difficult to keep up with, and it's hard for your community members to get the information that they need. It's also 24 hours, right? Slack never sleeps. So if you and your team members are on Slack and folks send a message, it might be 3:25 a.m. my time, but it's 11:30 their time, and they want to know why you're not answering them. So setting those expectations is really important, and that is certainly a challenge. Now I'm going to go to the good stuff. Really happy, exciting, Slack, awesome. We love Slack for our Wistia community. We think it's amazing. It's helped us a lot. And it's actually helped us grow our active user number by 500% in around 9 months. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why it's awesome. So Slack lets people take that armor off, right? That barrier for engagement, it really goes down. It allows people to let their personalities shine. It lets them put cute dog photos in our dog photos Slack channel. Like, it's great, right? They can really show off their personalities, they can be silly, they can be fun, because that barrier for engagement is really low. It's real time, it's chat, it suddenly feels very informal, very casual, right? So folks are able to really show their personalities, show the things that makes them unique, and makes it really fun for them. That essentially builds trust in the community. So if I know you, I know what kind of things you like, I know what makes you laugh, right? We have these conversations, all these different channels for different types of conversations. You're building trust with those community members, and you want to engage more because suddenly you have, 2,000 friends, right, that you're starting to get to know. One-on-one conversation is very common on Slack, and this was actually super surprising for me. I only really learned about this a few months ago in our community. People in the Wistia community use the Slack call feature a lot, which is amazing to me, right? They're having conversations one-on-one with other community members to solve their problems. So when I've asked, I did a survey, of course. I was like, hey, what do you use Slack calls for? And the answers were incredible. They were like, oh, anything from discussing my current problem at work, like what I'm trying to accomplish, to just talking and like hanging out, which is incredible. Like these people are getting together one-on-one to have conversations that would never happen on the Rails community. So just next level here for me. And Slack brings people together in ways that static communities can't. So static, I mean like Ruby on Rails, a forum, right? Essentially, in Slack, you can very quickly create organic meetups on your own without my participation as a community member manager at all, right? So people are able to say, hey, you know what? I'm in your area. Do you want to meet up? And then suddenly like 20 people are there meeting up, and I hear about it the next day, and I'm like, oh my God, which is pretty amazing, right? These folks are getting together very organically all around the world. So we've had these organic meetups in New York, in Boston, in London, in San Francisco, in LA, and it's just like really incredible how simple it is for folks to get together and make something happen right away without Wistia's involvement at all. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the point of this talk, right? How we actually got to that 500% number. We ended up moving our Wistia community from Rails because of all the problems that I discussed earlier over to Slack to try and boost that engagement. And how did we do that? Trust and patience. That's the number 1 and 2 ways that we ended up growing this community. So I think right now, it's startups want to move fast and like just go quickly and like solve problems, and it's great. But moving the community and really dealing with human beings who want to grow requires trust, patience, and time. And what we did is we moved our power users first. So that ended up being 9 people. Those were 9 people that were the most engaged. We all knew their names. We knew their personalities. We knew where they lived. It's like those 9 people, if you can think of those 9 people right now, that like everyone in your company knows, right? Those were our power users that we moved first. So essentially, I set up the Slack team. I got them all on a hangout, and I was like, hey, you know what? This is what we're doing. What do you think it should be like? Moved those folks into the Slack team, started having conversations around culture. So specifically, what do you want to talk about in this community? What's important to you in this community? How do you want to feel interacting with folks in the community? What kind of conversations do you think we should have in here? What kind of conversations do you not think we should have in here? What kind of channels do you think we should have? What kind of, which ways should we respond to folks who might be not a good fit for the community, right? So having all of those conversations with those 9 people first and actually making them a part of the process, a part of the decision-making process, is what allowed us to start a completely brand new, very unique culture in the community. We made those folks admins. Essentially, we gave them responsibility. If they wanted, they all said yes, they did want it, which was very cool, to moderate the community in a way that was fair, that was open, to flag potential issues, which in our entire time as a Slack community, we've only had 1. And I think that is the result of those culture conversations. And we incentivize these folks by giving them free tickets to Wistia Fest, which is our annual video conference. And and we give them swag, and we're more apt to use their work on our blog or to quote them or that sort of stuff. But there's no monetary involvement here at all. These folks are very passionate about the culture that they've created within the community, and I think that's why they're so engaged. From there, we moved community members in shifts. So we had our 9 power users, our admins, and then we moved 50 of the most engaged users after that. We had the same exact conversations. What do you want to see in this community? Which challenges do you want to solve? Which channels are going to be a good fit here? Which questions do you want to see answered? What kind of conversations do you want to see here? Having those same amount of conversations and that same amount of time really ended up building another layer on that culture. And so it's now this compact culture. Folks are in agreement. Folks are part of the process. Folks are feeling really good. And then we moved another round of folks, the next 100 folks. And we had the same conversations. And it was amazing to see when folks moved in, that culture is already there, but they can still contribute, right? Instead of taking all of your community members in one giant, batch and putting them in at once and having them kind of sort out the culture, we already had that foundation there for folks. After that, we ended up inviting all of our community members, and then we opened it up to the public. It was still invitation-only sort of style. So if you go to wistia.com/community, you can put in your email address, and then you get an invite from us. Therefore, that community is semi-private. You're unable to see those conversations unless you're actually in the community. And we did that for a reason. We wanted to maintain our culture. We wanted to maintain that high engagement and essentially have a community where folks are very active and thriving. Finally, we created channel owners. These are folks that work at Wistia who own a channel in the community. So if there's someone who's asked a question and no community member or admin can answer, Molly on the bottom left there is able to answer Wistia feedback questions because she works on our product team. Chris Levine up on top is able to answer production or video questions. He's our video producer, so on and so forth. So essentially, folks in the community know that they have a stake, right? There are people at the company who value them, who are there for them, who will answer their questions. They have a direct line to the Wistia company. I'm going to give some tips for growing your Slack community. For folks who might want to start a Slack community from scratch, maybe they want to move it from a different platform, or maybe you have one now and you're just starting out. I would recommend thinking about your community's purpose overall, right? Is it an engagement community? Is it a support community? Why even have a community, right? What's the point? An engagement community is our Wistia community, for example. We're having conversations. We're really trying to have discussions. We're focusing on interests and our members' growth. And we're tying back to marketing and product goals. Support communities, something like Stack, questions with one right answer, maybe a couple right answers. Gamification works. It's very support-driven. You want folks to succeed with your product. Create a weekly newsletter to link back to valuable conversations. It's very difficult in Slack to keep in touch with really valuable conversations and threads. And you want to make sure that folks have access to that, even if they're not there at the time, right? Slack is very real time. And for folks in different time zones or folks who can't get on at the time that those conversations are happening, you don't want them to be left behind. That's a screenshot of what our newsletter looks like here. There we go. Set up a weekly brag thread. This is a thread that we do at Wistia. It doesn't have to be a brag thread in your community. Essentially every Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern, I'll say, hey, what kind of accomplishments have you had this week? Have you done something really cool? Have you had any personal accomplishments? Did your dog win a race? Like, are you on a podcast? Did you write an article? Did you make a new video? And folks are so excited and they wait for the thread and they throw in everything that they're proud of and everyone comments or emojis on everything, right? Everything that someone submits. And that sense of pride is so great, and they know that other community members support them. And if they're like, hey, it'd be really cool if you could help me get this out to the public, and then all of a sudden you see 30 Wistia community tweets about this one thing that this person did, and they're so happy and they feel so supported. And it ties back to Casper and Angie's talk about rituals, right? Those folks know that this is coming up. It's exciting, they're all about it. Definitely recommend doing something like that. Find a place to store information. This is really important because information can get lost in Slack very easily, and as we know, super hard to search for it. Definitely try something out like Tetra. Tetra is a Slack integration. You can add documentation in there and then link it up to Slack so folks can search for something that is helpful for them. For example, all of our AMAs are stored there. If someone wants to ask a question that's been asked a million times, like what's the right camera for me, they can just do /Tetra find camera, and they get all of our documentation around all the conversations we've had about which camera is the right camera for you. So check that out. Assign channel owners, we talked about this. Track interesting analytics. I think I have conversations with community managers like this constantly where it's like, how do I prove my worth? How do I prove the value of this community? I would say always bring it back to how you can impact your business goals. Can you count the support tickets that you've deflected? Can you measure the amount of churn in your community for community members versus non-community members? Can you measure the amount of upgrades for community members versus non-community members? Whatever it is that's important to your business, tie it back to those business goals and make sure you can get those analytics from your community. Incredibly important. This one's not so easy, but with some negotiation and with those analytics, you can convince or try to convince your executive team to put down the money for Slack. You don't ever want your community members to see this red bar. You want them to know that they're valued, right? You will pay for the community to make it a success. Easier said than done, but incredibly important if you're thinking about using Slack as a community platform. Finally, and I'm right on time, I'm gonna leave you with this. A community must be nurtured to grow. These are human beings. It takes time. They have goals. They have challenges. You know, they want to succeed. They want to feel valued. They want representation. And that takes time and patience and trust and nurturing. Thank you.